Good morning, pre-algebra. We are starting chapter 8. You already kind of started chapter 8 on ALEKS. You should have by doing the chapter 8 readiness on ALEKS. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the chapter itself. This chapter is about solving equations. And in particular, this lesson is about solving equations with rational coefficients. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. So I have a couple slides here, and just 3 slides that have some text on them to try to explain what we're going to be doing, right, in the thinking, the theory behind what we're going to be doing in this lesson. So we can solve equations by dividing and multiplying, and our first section here is about dividing, because most of our equations are going to have multiplication in them. So an equation is a mathematical sentence stating that 2 expressions are equal, right? So 2 plus 3 equals 5. That means 2 plus 3 is the same as just having 5, right? For our example here on the slide, if 72 teens in a survey say they have a social network profile, and these teens are 3/4 of the teens surveyed, then the equation 3 divided by 4, 3/4, force, times x equals 72. This can be used to find the total number of teens surveyed. A value for the variable that makes an equation true is called a solution. So for 3/4 times x equals 72, the solution is 96, since 3/4 of 96 is 72, and that is a true statement. The key idea here to keep in mind is that we can kind of, we can multiply each side of an equation by the same non-zero number, right? And the 2 sides remain equal. And so our key concept here is that we have properties of equality. So if we do something to one side, with multiplication in this case, if we multiply one side by any number, as long as it's not 0, and we multiply the other side of the equation on the other side of the equal sign by that same number, they are still going to remain equal. And the same applies for division. We can divide each side of an equation by the same non-zero number, and the 2 sides remain equal. And this is going to help us solve for variables. So we can use those 2 ideas, right, those properties, and the idea of inverse operations to solve an equation. An inverse operation undo each other, right? To undo the multiplication of 3/4 and 3/4 the x time equals 72, we can apply the division property of equality to divide each side by the equation by 3/4. Applying the above property creates equivalent equations, which are equations that have the same solution. In other words, what we're saying is we can divide 3/4 times x by 3/4, and as I said in class, that kind of gets rid of that 3/4 on that side of the equation. But what we do to that side of the equation, we have to do to the other side. And so if we divide the other side by 3/4, right, then we do that to 72, and we get an answer, and what we're left with is x equals whatever that answer is, which we know from the previous slide. That answer is actually 96. So let's take a look at this in action. Okay, so our problem here, our example, is we are asked to solve 4.2x equals 52.5. Okay, so to solve it, we need to find out what x is, what that variable is. To check it, our solution, we're going to insert our answer for x back into the equation and see if it works. So let's go ahead and get started with this. So 4.2x equals negative 52.5. We are trying to isolate the x. So in order to isolate the x, we want to undo the 4.2, right? And since this is multiplication, to undo multiplication on this side, we are going to divide it by the same number. And that undoes the 4.2 times x. But what we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. Okay. So oftentimes you'll see teachers, right, cross this out because that ends up being 1. 4.2 divided by 4.2 is 1, or 4.2x divided by 4.2 leaves you with simply x, 1x. And now we have negative 52.5 divided by 4.2. Here we can just type that into our calculator. Right, actually I should put that as a 1x. That just helps us remember that we do have 1, because that 4.2 divided by, let's go back here, that 4.2 divided by 4.2 actually ends up being 1. All right, so if we type 52.5 divided by 4.2 in our calculator, we find out that that means that x equals, we're going to keep that negative sign because there's only one of them, 12.5. So that is our solution, right? This is our solution. And now we need to check it. So 4.2 times negative 12.5 equals negative 52.5. Well, again, if we type into our calculator 4.2 times negative 12.5, or we do it longhand, right, we're going to find out that indeed that those equal. So we have checked our solution because we know that whatever happens on this side must equal whatever is happening on that side. And that's what we see here. Let's try another one. All right, so here's another one. Negative 13.6a equals 217.6. Okay. Again, since this is multiplication taking place here, we are going to divide. We are looking to isolate our variable, which is a in this case. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 13.6 and negative 13.6. So down here, that's going to leave us with 1a, okay, because that negative 13.6 divided by negative 13.6 is a 1. We still have that a there. And over here, right, if we were to work this out in our calculator, we would find out that this would be negative 3.5. Sorry, my bad. I was looking at the wrong one there. That is not 3.5. This is negative 16. So that means that our solution, a equals negative 16. This is our solution. Now we need to check our solution. So we're going to go negative 13.6 times negative 16 equals 217.6. Again, we type that into our calculator and we find out, of course, those negatives are going to cancel out. So we're going to have a positive number over here. We're going to find out that 13.6 times 16 is indeed and so we have now checked, right? That's our check. Okay. All right. So solving equations by multiplying. So there we were solving equations by dividing, because what was taking place in the problem was multiplication. Remember, we have to do the opposite function to undo that function. So now we're going to look at multiplying by, or solving by multiplying. So equations in which a variable is divided can be solved by multiplying each side by the same number. This method is also useful when the coefficient of the variable is a fraction. Remember, the coefficient is the number that's attached to the variable. And so when there's a fraction there, it's useful to multiply, because again, remember, a fraction is basically just a division problem. Okay? So here we have an example of one. We need to solve 1 over 4 times y equals -8. So we'll go ahead and write this. I couldn't get my slide to write the 1 over 4 like I just wrote it with my pen there. But that's how we're setting this up. So, right, since this is a division problem, we are dividing this side by 4. Okay, and that's the key thing to remember here. Because this is division, this is 1. Let me change colors there. That was too late. Right, this is 1 divided by 4. So if we're dividing this side by 4, and we want to do the opposite, we're going to times this side by 4. So 4 times 1/4 times y equals -8 times 4. Because what we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. Okay? So on this side, this is going to end up being, right, remember, we would actually do this, and so we have 4 over 1 times 1 over 4. We multiply those, that equals 4 over 4. So that means that on this side we have 4 over 4 times y equals -8 times 4. Right, and I'm just doing that step here. I'm going to now move that up to here. And 4 over 4 is 1. So now we can write 1y equals, and -8 times 4, well, 8 times 4 is 32. We keep that negative. We're going to go ahead and write that there. So that means that y equals -32. And this is our solution. Now, to check our solution, we just plug it back in. So, 1/4 times -32 equals -8. Well, again, we're going to write this as 1 over 4 times -32 over 1 equals -8. Notice what that means. That's now -32 over 4 equals -8. And if we divide 32 by 4, we find out that indeed, or -32 by 4, we have -8 equals -8. So this is our check. And we know that our solution is correct because we have -8 on this side, -8 on this side. They are equal. All right, that is it. So check ALEKS for your homework assignment, homework 8.1, and get to work on that. And we will check in tomorrow.